When I got up this morning, it basically said, I think I should wear a sport jacket. There's going to be a lot of people there, and I don't want to really have a bad reputation for the club. So I called Harry, and only because I noticed that Harry's been wearing some decent shirts the past few weeks. So he said to me, I think you should dress Kiwanis. And so I did. And I think I should have wore a sport jacket, Harry. Right? Can we just smoke for us? Okay. Let me give you the club's position on our guest speakers before we start. We provide the venue. The speakers provide the information. And that doesn't mean that we condone or endorse whatever the speakers present. We leave that up to you folks. We don't do that. So with that said, let me set the ground rule for the presentation today. We're going to have about a half hour in terms of the presentation, number one, and we're going to have Q&A afterwards, and in that order. Let me introduce today's speaker, Jess DiPasquale. He's no stranger to this room. He's a Westonite, he's a fellow Kiwanian, and he's also a developer of the Senior Living Project. Jess and his group are here today to talk to us about what surrounds that project and why we should be listening to it. Jess, the floor is yours.
It's important right from the beginning to just say, I'm a Westonite, I've lived here 23 years, I'm a neighbor, I plan to stay in Weston forever. The kids will grow, they'll go on. They forbid me from ever moving out because they said that I would be selling their memories. So I am stuck here, and I am going to retire here. But what I started to do with a vision for this active adult community is, I did something simple. I just started reading the strategic plans for the town. And there's three interesting ones. And in those plans, and I'll read from the one from 2010, which was a conservation plan, it says, the committee encourages the exploration of senior housing solutions with private developers so as to avoid any impact on town funds, such as securing a developer to purchase land or possibly ground lease townhomes. And I thought about that. And then there's another one of 2015. And that says the development of zoning for age-restricted 55 plus or senior housing can be undertaken. And then it describes exactly how in the details, which any of us can read. Then there was a demographic presentation to three of the boards in town, Board of Selectmen, Finance Board, and the Board of Education. And in that particular study, it said housing balance, provide facilities and services that keep empty nesters and the graying population from leaving Weston in large numbers. So, interestingly, I talked to various people around town, and I talked to planning and zoning, and I found out they've been talking about it for many years. And many of the people in town have a dilemma, and that dilemma, especially in this room, we know very well. And that is, these are people that are seniors in town, 55 plus, I'm in that group. These are people that have raised their children in town. These are people who have paid their taxes for years. These are the empty nesters and the people that really are the backbone of the town, the volunteers, the committees that we have. They serve on all the boards. It's people in this room. And truly, many of them, and many of them have already expressed an interest in a senior living community, have nowhere to go. When they want to downsize and stop paying high taxes, when they want to have less maintenance on their house, when they want to have a community of seniors and be out of their large homes, they have to go to North Carolina. We've lost some friends to that state. They go to Florida, they go to Phoenix. And we lose a very important asset in our town, and that is our senior community. And that senior community mixes very well with our younger community. Everything from the kindergarten kids right up to the high school kids. And there's been some great stories that I won't get into now because I want to get into the meat of this presentation of interaction between young and old in our town. So to create a town that meets the needs of every citizen, I started saying to myself, you know what? A lot of writing, a lot of talk, a lot of strategic plans. Let's do something about it. Let's get the ball rolling. And I can tell you, and I know practically everyone in this room well, I know this is a big move for Weston, and I know this is a big decision. And I'm not pushing it for any reason other than to get the ball rolling in Weston so this town evolves the right way. And there's three things that are important to this particular project, and I'll tell you what they are. One is that this project increases the grand list and increases the tax contribution to the town. And I think we all agree that's very important, and you're going to hear that in just a minute, how that happens. The second thing that it does is address the needs of the senior community, and I just talked about that, and that's a very important need that we have to say everybody is satisfied and everybody is taken care of as we move through the phases of life. And the third thing, which I consider important, and we could debate this and we could talk about this, but here's what it is. The best defense is a good offense. And we have limited open space in Weston from the type of space developers could come in and buy. And when I heard that Avalon had looked at spaces in Weston, available land, Toll Brothers had looked at available land in Weston, and other outside developers, I started saying to myself, for the limited type of tracts of land that are close to town, the best thing to do is develop these pieces within the guidelines of the character of Weston, within the guidelines of what Weston wants to do, and properly with people that live here. And that is going to lead me into what I call the Weston Dream Team, which I'm going to introduce in a minute. But that's an important thing, because if the land is not available for the carpetbaggers to come in and say, Weston hasn't addressed various things that the rest of the state is addressing, and I don't want to say those words, well, we're going to do that for Weston, and we're going to approve what other people want. But if that land is not available for those people to come in, then Weston is evolving the way we want it to evolve. So with that in mind, we had to pick the right team, because everything and every project and every smart person in this room realizes it's truly the people behind a project that make it. So we have a group here at this table from Weston that will handle every aspect of this proposed project. Peter Romano owns a company called Lansing. Peter has done incredible projects developing land all over Fairfield County and other states as well. He lives in Weston. He lives at Wedgesfield. He's a Weston resident who knows the fabric of this town. Peter developed Tall Pines. Peter developed Sydney Oaks. Peter developed Hemlock Ridge. And Peter developed houses on Michael's Way. These are beautiful additions to Weston. A tremendous guy, you're going to hear about him next. Ed Parker is the architect who lives, by the way, right across the street from the Phillips Farm, which is the property we're proposing to develop for an adult community. Ed, being the designer and creator of beautiful homes, and you're going to see his work, is the person who would create this development. He has to look at it every day. He has 4 kids in the school. He is a long-time resident who's going to be here probably till he retires. And interestingly, Ed's a guy who does very nice things in his own neighborhood. He was the guy who helped develop the Segley Park. And why? He lives next door. So he said, hey, if this is going to be developed, I want to be the guy that does it. So he's coming from a very interesting perspective. Of course, he doesn't get paid, and he's doing it gratis. Thank you. Diana works for Camelot, local real estate agent who has helped us navigate through the system of purchasing this property, and also a person who cares very, very much about what happens in Weston. Joe Lipton lives at Singing Oaks and is a very astute developer, tremendous experience, and we'll get into a little bit of his quality of development, which is very important to what we do. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Peter and Peter Romano, who will get into the actual development of the land and some of the other things that I've introduced.
Good morning. I'm actually not going to get into the development of land because what's happening first on Monday night, I'm going to take you through that, what actually happens next. Weston, what has been in other towns, lived in other towns, Weston only has two basic zoning districts. One is the neighborhood shopping center, which is downtown there. My daughters call it the mall. And 2 acre zoning. All the rest of the properties in Weston. There's some lots that are 1 acre. They're known as what they call non-conforming, pre-existing non-conforming lots. So some people may be on 1 acre, but generally the standard now, if anybody was to develop a piece of property now, they would have to have 2 acres land. So in order to bring forward this senior living facility or adult active community, we had to add a new zone to the zoning regs. And the way you do that is to suggest an amendment to the town. So what is going to happen on Monday evening is, that is what the Planning and Zoning Commission is going to consider. Now, when we presented, quite frankly, our office actually created the application because Weston doesn't even have an application for that. And we put together, based on our experience in other towns, and you've probably seen it on the town's website, and it's in Town Hall in the Planning and Zoning Office, if you want to go see it, we prepared a little site plan that shows when that amendment, should it be successful, what it would look like on a piece of paper. Is it the end result? Not at all. Our office prepared before Ed was involved in the project. He's brought forward some new ideas. It may evolve even more through the public hearing process. So on Monday night, you're going to hear all the components that go in to allow active adult living community to potentially be successful in the town of Weston. There'll be input from the Planning and Zoning Commission, there'll be input from the public, there'll be input from the regional planning agencies. There are, I think, 2 of them that'll actually be reviewing this. They weigh in on a regional basis what this means to the town of Weston. And then if you happen to be successful there, and we've prepared the plans and the application and all the information that went into the planning and zoning, knowing full well that the planning and zoning, I think we were met with reasonable excitement that someone was coming forward, and then we felt that they would be a part of the actual creation of this amendment. And then if that happens to be successful, which should take, I would suspect a few months to get through that, between back and forth. If that ends up being successful, now you have a new zone in Weston. Just like the 2 acre residential zone, you'll have an active adult living community as a zoning regulation. Once that's in place, we'll go away for a few months and then create a site plan on how we could then take that new regulation and turn it in, just like somebody would for a subdivision. When we did the 12 line subdivision, you had a 2 acre, we laid it all out, and we came back and showed the town how the roads were going to be built and where the houses were going to go and what the grading was going to be like and how we're going to install septic systems. So then you come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission with those plans in hand. We will, at that point, go into the Department of Transportation, because it's on a state highway, we'll be in front of the Department of Environmental and Energy Protection in Westboro, because they're going to oversee the construction or the design of the septic system. We'll be in front of the Conservation Commission, because it's a chunk of wetlands. All these things pretty much happen similarly when you're developing a subdivision. This is a little bit higher level of scrutiny, but it's similar agencies that you go and say. So now you've got a site plan in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Except we've written into this amendment so that it would take actually the approval of the site plan to another level also. There is other towns have it. You have a couple of special permits in town here, things like the country club is a special permit. Whenever they need to do something, they're going to plan and zoning because they have a special permit requirement. And what this does is actually a little bit higher level of scrutiny and standards we need to meet. Unlike the standards zoning regulation and zoning regulations that are in place right now, a special permit allows the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider other things that aren't in the normal site plan approvals. Things like, how does it impact the community? How does it impact the neighbors? Is it keeping in character with the neighborhoods and the community? Our firm recently finished the YMCA, how controversial that was in Westport. That was a special permit that was in a 2-acre residential zone. And they had the special permit consideration, and we kind of met all those things. We had 23 lawsuits there, we won them all. So it was, my point in saying that to you is, I would be fearful of, this is not doesn't break 2-acre zoning like some people have heard. This is a new regulation that is in your planning and zoning regs. That's what this is. And when you have, it has a certain level that is far beyond any other permits in town right now. So that there are ways, I think the fear some people are that we're going to get run over with this kind of development here. That's not the case. I mean, I think eventually when the amendment gets fully flushed out, there may be a cap on the number of these units. There's a whole lot of things we can do to protect Weston from thinking that this is all of a sudden going to turn us into, a retirement community. You won't have that situation here. And you'll hear Ed say in a few minutes the way the houses look, but when we crafted this amendment, we adhered to all the single-family residential regulations. You'll see that the height requirement's the same, the coverage of the lot is the same, the septic system has to adhere to the health department codes, all of the things that, because our idea is that I don't want to take Ed's presentation away, but all the things when you drive down Paul Pine subdivision, it's going to replicate that kind of look. From the outside, you may not know, except for the fact that it went through this process. The idea is to make these look like larger single-family homes, but nevertheless single-family homes. And these regulations would restrict somebody from building a certain size home, a certain number of homes. So I think it's, obviously I think it's a good, well-written amendment that could be beneficial to the town. And I think you'll have an opportunity to really get into the nuts and bolts of it on Monday night. But Matt won't be around, obviously, for the questions. I'd like to turn it over to Ed and sort of take you through some of his thoughts on the architecture.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
All right.
First of all, I live right beside the Sacred Park. I'm sort of across the street from the property. And when I heard about this in the paper, I think is what it was, I kind of went, what are they doing? What's going on? So then I saw Joe Lipton's name at the bottom. I said, well, I need to give Joe a call. But before I was able to do that, he called me and asked me if I'd like to be involved in this project. And just like Segley, we got together, had a group of young parents get together and redo the park back there and put in the playground as it is, and put in the gazebo and the entry to the pond back there if you've been back there. But that was done back when my kids were really little, so probably about 10 years ago now. And every year since then, that park has really been used, and we see that, and we can see the pond from our house, and it's gotten so much more use since we did that. And that's a good thing for Weston, felt then, and still think now. I'm also on the Shot Town Committee, rejuvenating that parcel as well, which I think could be a great asset to the town. So when hearing about this property up here, I've driven past that property for 13 years, didn't even know what was back there. The berm right on the side of the road is completely blocked that off, and so I had the fortune to go to Christian's house and walk the property. It's a beautiful meadow that's back there that's really hidden from view from the road. And we want to keep it that way, of course, and create a development back there that's really bucolic and light that fits into Weston. And we've done some quick character sketches over here, which basically shows a residential development with architecture that's reminiscent of Weston colonial farmhouses, Center Hall colonials, but very regional vernacular that you would see in New England. That's the type of work that we do on a daily basis in my firm. We work with historical precedent, making sure that our proportions and the rhythm of the house is accurate to history, and that one of the biggest compliments we get from a client is when we show them a picture of a new house that we've done, they'll say to us, well, which part did you do? Thinking it was a renovation. So that to us is a very high compliment. Here's some of our work here. But that's sort of the nature of the architecture that we're looking at. And what we'd like to do is create a community, and again, until we get parameters from the zoning board to design this, nothing's been designed. However, the thought is that it would be a community that sort of surrounds a central meadow, a park-like setting that these houses can look out on. They would be houses. They would be 6 structures, residential structures, and in each house have 6 units in each house. But it very much would have the feel of a residential neighborhood. This is not cluster housing. This is not tract housing. This is not high-rise condos. It is a development of residential scale and structures and detailing. The idea, even on the sketches here, is to show, the porch, we look out onto this meadow, that the people will be engaged, and that the parking and the utilities are around probably hidden from view, so that they aren't something that's an eyesore when you come in, and that we have to organize the parking so that that is the case. We really want to make this look nice. We feel like with the setbacks that are going to be put in place, that we have plenty of room for screening and to adjust the siding of the properties so that the neighboring properties still retain some of their view and do not see these as, these high-rises, these eyesores in the landscape. So that's really the vision, is to make it look like it's always been in this residential neighborhood. We call it very quiet, but it's also near town, near the center of town. We don't want it to be an isolationist community, sort of way out. You want to be, you want it to feel like it's part of town and that it's integrated into the landscape. There are a few buildings on site. We're looking at the red barn there, which we feel like has good bones. We can renovate that to a community center or some sort of thing. That there will be amenities there. There's a pond in the front that could be transformed in some way that the town could enjoy as well. And then the historic house that's on the site as well has the possibility of being renovated into some sort of use. So I believe that's the case. Yeah, and then Joe Lipton, I'll hand the microphone over to him.
Jess, I know what put me last, so I would have the least amount of time to speak.
Actually, Peter's.
That was Peter's idea. So I am the lucky new kid on the block at 63 years old. My wife Lois and I moved into this town 3 years ago with 2 young kids, and we moved here largely because we wanted to be in good schools. And we had moved from New York City, where I've lived since the 70s. And I was very fortunate to meet some great people. I know a few of you here, but I was able to meet very quickly after I moved in Jess. And what did I learn from Jess? I learned that this is a guy who served this town for his entire life here, and just immediately started in on me about serving the town.
Well, I think I used to be running Kiwanis.
And then it escalated. And then he surrounded me with other people he moved into serving the town. And just came to me and said, Joe, I want to do something in real estate. And what about this? I said, Jess, what are you doing? What about this? Jess, what are you doing? What about this? I said, wow. And what he brought to me that was wow was Emerson's property. And what he brought to me that was wow was something I felt that was really good for this town, because I've spent my life as a developer in New England and in New York City. And I've seen what happens when things get done with planning, and I've seen when things get done without planning. And this is a highly planned, highly thought out, appropriate piece of development for this town, which really does need a direction, a thoughtful direction. And this is a man who has served, as has Ed, as has Diana, and Emerson. I just want to tell you, it's been a pleasure to meet you, and I appreciate the direction that you're taking and what you're trying to do with us. And then lastly, Ed, because Pete, because you're going to close, I understand. I'm going to set you up too. It's a joke between Pete and I that he's done so many developments, and I've done so many developments. Well, I assure you, Pete has done more developments than me. But everything I've done has been for my own account. And I'm accountable here. I live here. I have 2 children in the school here. My wife serves as president in the Norfield Children's Center. So we have really started here, and I'll end where I started. I'm lucky to be on the block.
Okay, 2 things. This I have no problem explaining, but some of the, I didn't go into a little bit before. Obvious question is, how many other potential spots are available for this kind of development? And we went through the tax rolls, and this actually comes from the tax assessor. We didn't create it. You can see there's probably, 8 or 9 of them. Most of them are Audubon Society property, Nature Conservancy, Aquarium in town. Most of them are, the town stuff is developed. The one that doesn't appear on this list because it's broken up in a strange way, we all know it's under one ownership, and that's Weston Wood. So, there's potentially, probably 8 or 9. How Aquarium sometimes works. They're able to magically change their classification of their land and turn it from an A-class piece of property, protecting that reservoir, and all of a sudden it becomes a C in subdivision. But nevertheless, that's the number of the potential. We restricted it to state highways, only the traffic considerations. It's the way of limiting it a little bit, and obviously the traffic concerns are a little bit less when you're on the state highway. Next thing. Oh yeah, so you have 50 feet of frontage along, and I'll explain something too. Some of you can figure some of this out. Obviously, the question comes up, could somebody assemble 15 acres of land in the end of 2 acres? Yeah, they probably could. We didn't go through that exercise. Is it economically feasible? We didn't even look at it, because you can do a whole exercise on how you can put 15 acres up and down for 53 and 57. So before anybody thinks that we were, not representing everything, I'll be perfectly clear. We didn't go into that exercise. These are what right now 15 acres or better. And then you can do your math if you want on all the other pieces if you want. Next slide. I'm probably the least capable person to explain this, but the financial person in the office did this. So my limitation of the knowledge of taxes is I know I send a check in twice a year to the town. But this is you can do the math yourself, you can question it, but this gives you a basic idea of what a development like this could potentially have. If we have the 36 units we're suggesting, it'll all be privately owned on a non-town owned piece of property. Everybody will be responsible for their own maintenance stuff. The revenues of taxes could be in the neighborhood of $450,000 a year versus the standard 2-acre residential subdivision that piece of property could potentially support. You could make your, assessment of how much we could do based on the wetlands and the slopes and stuff. But we took a reasonable approach on it, and you can see the differences in the taxes that we claim for a single-family residential subdivision versus what we could do with the 36 units. And it goes beyond that, just the simple things as far as what it does for the community, what it does for the people that are going to live there. People can say that there's homes that are small enough that you can do buy a $600,000 home in Weston, but this project eliminates all the maintenance and all the other things that goes along with having a 2-acre piece of property in Weston, and I can attest to that because I am the ultimate empty nester. I'm a single guy living in 7,500 square feet of house, so this is very appealing to me.
The adult community is important. it contributes over $400,000 to the grand list without adding children to the school. And that's very important from a cost standpoint. It's also a private community, meaning that the concept is the people who would live there would bear the cost of snow removal, maintaining the roads and the landscaping, et cetera, like any other condo type association. If a subdivision gets built there, that becomes part of the town's cost. So it's families, first of all, that would move in, so that does add children to the school, and there is definitely a cost to that. But the town also then has to maintain that road, which adds cost to the town. So there's a big difference. Even though a subdivision might contribute over $200,000 to the grand list, you have to reduce that amount by all the costs then that the town has to bear for a new road in town and a new subdivision, which nets it down to somewhere between $7,000 and $10,000 that after you take the cost to the town. So that analysis, and we can crunch the numbers in more detail, and I'm sure the town tax assessor will, really shows a good comparison to going with an adult community like we're proposing.
Lastly, or second to lastly, we have just a little chart. I don't think it's in the handouts that came out today. Is it or not? No, but it'll be on Monday night at our hearing. Just to give you an idea of what Weston's taking place in Weston over the last few years, last 20 years actually, that people 55 and older, about 25% of the residents versus the 32% of people that are below 55, and you can see that each one of those numbers increase and decrease as you move from 2010 to 2014, which demonstrates there is potentially a need. I know Jess is within his own little home, friends and family and other people in Weston that felt that this is a viable option for Weston. And then lastly, just to show you, it was sort of a thing that Joe suggested, that little dot in the middle is kind of what's dedicated to the seniors, and all the rest of the town. I'm sorry. No. It was an omen. That's our little piece of the development versus what the rest of the town of Weston is. And I think we're ready to answer the questions.
I want to thank everybody for listening, and I'm sure there's a few questions, and we'd love to answer them for you. Yes, Dan? Absolutely.
I'm Dick DiPasquale, I've been resident in Weston for 43 years. I have a question about the financial side of this proposal from the point of view of the individual resident considering moving into it. Bear with me for a minute. Your median price point for these units is about $635,000 if I read your chart right. Now, that's not too far off the assessed valuation of my home. I can't be any more precise than that because the market's been crazy and so forth. But let's assume that I am the average Joe Westonite and my home comes with my tax rolls at about that figure. So if I sell my home and move into your community here, I'm trading dollars. Okay, point number one. Point number two, these are condominiums. By definition, I am the owner of the condominium and I have a tax responsibility directly to the town because of that, just like I do in my house. If the values are the same, the taxes are going to be the same unless there's a drop in the mill rate. Okay. But then I have common charges, which will cover heat, light, shelter, sidewalks, all that good stuff, just like I do in my own home. So where is the financial incentive to me to go through the destruction of moving by office and downsizing in order to move into this very attractive looking community? I don't see that I am offered a dollar incentive. I'm betting on a decline in mill rate to offer me some profit here. But I don't see, and that's due to factors totally beyond my control. So what are you offering me, the individual home-owning Westonite, as an incentive to make this move?
So, first of all, that's an excellent question, thank you. And I want to be there when you're clear out your act. Who knows what you're going to find in our cheap socks? Good idea. But anyway, your point is well taken for exactly what your objective is. But you have to understand that everybody will have a different objective. We're only proposing 36. There's already been enough people that have said, I want one when this gets built. It may not be right for everybody. So if you take the example of someone trading down and they sell their house for $1 million and their taxes are $15,000 to $20,000, this offers a significant savings to that tax. Also, the fact that their maintenance might be very expensive on a very large house, this is a significant solution for them. The other markets we found of people asking for this type of housing is, I live in Weston, I'm a young family, I have 2 or 3 kids, I want my parents close by. And they live on Long Island, they live upstate Massachusetts, they live far away in Connecticut, they live in Florida. I want my parents near the grandchildren. I want to be able to go out to dinner with them on a Wednesday night at the Cubs, maybe. But that's a whole other discussion. Get a bottle of wine. However, my point is, that's also a market, and a very important market, who is clamoring to have a solution like this, not only for the price of what we're talking about in the mid-sixes. You can buy a house in Weston in the mid-sixes, but you can't buy new, you can't buy the amenities we are looking at, and you can't buy a community. So if I were to move my parents into one of these homes and say, you got in at the right price point, you could afford the tax, you could afford the maintenance, but what they're getting is a senior community. And that community will have a community house, we haven't discussed the details, it will have walking areas, it will have senior amenities. Very different from buying a house in the mid-sixes on 2 acres that perhaps could be remote, that doesn't connect them to the center of town. So hopefully, that's an explanation. Any other questions? Bob?
Thanks for the presentation. Actually, I wasn't aware of all the other people that are involved, and I am much more comfortable knowing that every single one of them lives in this town.
Thanks.
That is a big comfort to me. Regarding the financial aspects of it, the idea that we could have significantly increased tax revenue without additional impediments on the town. Specifically, when you're talking about not having school-age children in the community. Now, the town then therefore has to pay for it. If you're talking about a 55 and older community that is regulated by, the state, that state statute that you can put that in, how does that prevent having school-age children in one of those areas?
Living in these homes?
Yeah, because I thought you could have, maybe a caretaker or something along those lines.
No,
what is the law regarding exactly who can have it?
There are specific guidelines for 55-plus community, and Joe or Peter want to talk?
Our particular development,
I'm more talking broadly, what are the laws that prohibit somebody from, essentially moving in, a single parent that has
Right.
2 kids in schools,
Right.
or, somebody moving in caretakers or whatever.
that would actually be, we provided for that in the regulation of the amendment we're suggesting, and that would be like condominium rules, basically. The only thing we limited to 1 child over 21 years of age for some period of time. We thought about a caretaker if they need to be, we wrote something like that into the regulations, but it would eventually become a condominium, or, what they do in New York City, they have boards that regulate what happens in the particular building. That's the way this would happen. We'd have to, if it's going to be dedicated 55 or older, there are standards in which we have to adhere to. we're suggesting that one child over 21 can stay there for a period of time, and then there's a caretaker if necessary to be there, that one. So one person passes away, the remaining resident stays there with a caretaker.
But the idea, and that's a good question, Bob, is to restrict families. Sorry.
Keep going.
Hello? Okay, yes, go ahead, question.
Actually, I had the same question that Bob did. But
All right,
so I
that's
had
it.
another question about, aren't there some federal guidelines and laws about when you develop a property, residential property, a certain amount of it has to be dedicated as affordable?
No.
There's nothing like that?
No, we have an excellent attorney, John Fallon, who's done a tremendous amount of these. You'll hear him speak Monday night. And he will go over all the state and federal regulations, but you do not have to do that. Yes? Yeah.
So I have a small list of questions. I'm guessing it'll cover some of the questions that might be. Has non less than 95 years?
I'm sorry?
Has non less than 95 years?
Yes, it cannot be restricted to just Weston.
Gotcha. And I think your presentation says.
That's also a fairly big market.
Sure. I think your presentation says
Use the mic.
the purchasers have to be 55 and older.
Correct.
It's not occupants, it's purchasers.
Well, the purchases, as well as what Peter just explained, the condominium rules, like any condominium association, will have specific rules that limit who could live there. This is not meant for stipulation.
So it's not purchasers, it's not occupants.
Both.
Can I amplify this? Let me amplify that answer.
In other words, I could buy one for my parents.
Yes.
Let me amplify the answer just for everybody. So, one, I'm not an attorney, I know we have some attorneys here. Restricting property to people who are 55 and above is discrimination. However, there is federal law that allows this type of discrimination. I know that's a charge for it. And the reason is because there's a need, a recognized need in the country, so it's federal. With respect to who lives there are two components to controlling that. One is the regulations in the town, and the second are the condominium rules. So the condominium itself is responsible for essentially policing, but the town does have jurisdiction over who lives there. So is that a better?
Right, but for example, I could buy one for my parents.
The answer is technically yes.
The other question is, the particular, what are the HOA fees, by the way, that you're envisioning, assuming no extra amenities?
Say again.
Assuming no extra amenities, what are the HOA fees that you envision for this property?
So those details we have not sorted out yet
You don't know.
for this discussion. That would require all the planning and zoning input and exactly what amenities and the cost of those amenities once they're called out.
Right. How much of this property is that land versus
Wetlands.
Yeah, there's, along I guess the southerly boundary there's probably about 3 acres of wetlands. And the balance is about 12. Yeah, and the other thing too is wetlands can count towards lot area in 2-acre residential zone, so it's not a prohibitive, but you don't have to diminish the lot area by the wetlands.
Right. And,
To your point on that, there's a beautiful stream and pond that would be developed for that community.
Right.
In the wetlands area, it's just a fabulous place to walk to the right of the property.
And last question, I understand that you as a resident have the right to propose a zoning change like this.
It's a zoning,
A new
addition.
zoning classification.
That's right, not a change.
Yes, new zoning classification category. This has possibly, call it unintended consequences or deep impact on the town. I guess my question would have been, why file for a zoning request and then have these discussions, because now we've triggered the clock, so to speak. Why not have these discussions first And you don't have to, it's like you have every right to do what you're doing.
So to your point, and I just want to get out there the other question, these discussions have been going on for years in Weston.
Right,
Years.
well, he's kind of, he's on
And speak up,
Yeah.
well, you know, it's because someone has to step up, and someone has to stick their neck out, and someone has to make the proposal. You know, my wife tells me I'm not a genius, and I have to hear that every day.
So do I, and most of those do either.
And when I talk about these projects to her, she goes, I have 5 kids. I don't want to hear about one more project. Get out of here, I'm driving the kids to school. Okay? But my point to that story is that I have put my neck out there. I have connected the dots. I've read 3 strategic plans. I've gone to every speaker for the last 10 years. I've been in every meeting that pertains to this town evolving in a positive way. The problem is it never quite happens. So what you're seeing here today, and what you're going to see Monday, is the process is working. We are moving ahead. We're doing something positive. Where that goes is going to be up to the decision of the planning and zoning board. But from my personal opinion, I believe strongly Weston has to evolve in a positive direction with people in Weston on a team of people who live here, or someone else will come into Weston and start developing. And that will be a day that I won't be happy with. Any other questions? Yes?
Just following up on that point, you guys are dedicated Westerners. I understand it's kind of fiduciary responsibility in developing this property. But let's assume that this passes. What's the presidential value of this passing to somebody else who comes in from out of town who doesn't really care about Weston doing the same damn thing?
Okay, so that's the key point, and it's an excellent point. What I had said at one point, the best defense is a good offense. Is that it? Is a father, hey, close her up. Okay. But tricky mics. So, I do. To do something proper, to make something economically feasible for someone to come into town and create some other development different than what we're doing, it has to be something that people would buy and move into. Therefore, location, proximity, and the type of land that's available. Being close to town, and this type of land that would support septic and wells, because that's what we're talking about, just like any other subdivision in town, septic and wells, you're very limited. What Peter showed up there is all the other potential tracts of land on State Road, it's very important to understand that, are owned by Audubon, by Nature Conservancy, by hydraulic, Bridgeport Hydraulic. So there's no farm sitting there presently as we know it, that if this becomes a major success, someone can jump in and do it right behind us. The idea of assembling 2-acre lots on a state road would require buying, you'd have to buy something to the tune of 8 homes with homes on it, and they have to be contiguous. You'd have to knock them all down, and then you'd have to arrange for 15, 16 acres. In my opinion, very improbable, and probably wouldn't happen in our lifetime. That is a big stretch to say that people are going to start buying other people's homes, make sure that they get every single home that's contiguous, then knock them all down to do something of that nature. So I don't see any other properties except for potential of Weston Woods. And that's a little quirky right now because it's divided into 2-acre parcels, so we have to be all combined. It's not on the market, it's not for sale, and it's a little farther out, and I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried. There's always a fear somebody else is going to do something we don't like, but I don't see it.
Yeah, but your supposition is that they have to have 15 acres and you get a developer, you're going to buy 3 pieces of property at 6 acres and build half the size.
No, this is for 15 plus acres. That's the way
I'm
it's
saying,
been.
if you get approved,
You can't go less than 15 acres if we get approved.
oh, that's interesting, okay.
Yeah, so that's the way it's written. It's a zone addition. And those are the requirements. Moreover, it has to have 50 feet of frontage on state road. So somebody then can be restricted and say, okay, I'll buy this house, this house, this house, this house, knock it down, but those 2 houses have a small driveway that maybe opens up to other property. Doesn't qualify. Doesn't qualify. 50 feet on the state road. Yes, sir.
You've written your own amendment and you specified 50 feet on the state road. But what's to stop someone from coming in and saying it doesn't have to be in the state road, it can be way out in the wilderness or wherever you want, any place, and these are 55 and plus, they're active, they're drivers. Isn't this the camel's nose under the tent?
Great question. Fantastic question, and here's the answer for anyone who wants to stick their neck out and do a project like this. Anyone in this room, anyone from the outside, Attila the Hun, which is bad developers from Toll Brothers, right now can go to planning and zoning in Weston with an application and ask for that application to be accepted. And they could write it any way they want. They could come up with any idea they want. They want to do, high-rise condominiums and parking lots on 5 acres. The point is, planning and zoning most likely wouldn't accept that, and the point is, there would be no room in town for a zone addition like that. So it doesn't open up every crazy harebrained scheme that exists out there, because that exists now. Anyone can do that right now. We have had inquiries on affordable housing, and I hate that word. I just don't think that that would be the right development for Weston. But if someone came in, and if someone said, I have a petition here, I want to do an 8-30G in Weston, and I want my application accepted, we as citizens of Weston would have one tough road to prevent that. And you don't have to take my word for it. You could ask all the attorneys that you're going to see Monday night. Those are the real geniuses. And they will tell you 100% Weston is open to that development. And guess what? And Peter's going to say, guess what? The only way to prevent that is not have usable land where that becomes economically feasible.
I just want to make 2 points, and I think Ms. Strauss knows this. I mean, if somebody wanted to come in and do a development not 50 feet and not on the state highway, you'd have to basically write a new amendment. This doesn't allow that. I mean, somebody could come in and ask for a text amendment, which people do when you already have an amendment in place, and you just want to tweak it a little bit, they call it a text amendment. But if somebody suggested that, oh, why can't I do it on, Lions Plains Road, the reason this regulation doesn't allow it to do that is because we restricted at 50 feet of frontage on the state highway. The second thing, I'm sure most of you know this, but I know the word gets bumped around or shoved around a lot. Condominium doesn't reflect the living unit that somebody's in. Condominium is a form of ownership. So when people think this is a condominium development, it is only because it's the way the ownership is going to be owned. There'll be common land and there'll be people that will individually own their own units. I just want to clarify that. Yes, sir.
A few questions. Well, clearly, in my mind, this property is going to get developed one way or the other. How many 2-acre lots would be available with big-ass houses on them if it got chopped up that way?
I think 6 to 7. I mean, without fully flushing it out, it looks like it's 15 acres, there's wetlands there, you gotta give some open space. 6 to 7 acres could potentially be on.
So just so you know, big houses aren't really selling that quickly right now.
Yeah.
And obviously, from what I saw earlier, the increase in the tax base of the town would be much more beneficial if this project were to go through. Is that correct?
That's the example that we've shown so far.
All right. So can I buy one of the buildings and lease them out?
You're going to be on the waiting list.
No, seriously, I mean, what about the leasing out?
So it's gotta be,
The ownership only?
right.
Owner occupied only?
Let me just make a comment. Once again, that is controlled by the rules of the condominium. which can be influenced in the amendment which is in front of the town.
Okay.
Anybody in here lived in town in 1978? So what was the reaction of the town when they then implemented the 2-acre zone? What was it before? What was the zoning before 1970? We went to 2-acre zoning in 1978, is that correct?
No.
When was it? When was it?
Yes, this is 60s.
It was in the 60s, okay.
I've been continuing since 58, and I would say there were very few houses on smaller parcels than 2 or more acres.
Right, okay.
I believe the zoning regs are from 1956, the original zoning regulations are from 1956.
Gotcha. Okay. Good.
Quick question, the 50 feet, is that because that's what Emerson owns? Why not 100 feet or?
No, it's just, it's what actually single-family residential lots are required to have as well.
Okay.
When they're rear
So
lots.
it's just-
Yeah. What else was it? I want to say one thing. Granted, we have a piece of property that we've got in our target, on our bullseye, but I think this regulation does apply all over town. It just has to be on the, I mean, obviously, we're gonna go forward, if this is successful, we'll go forward with those property, but this does allow, for instance, Weston Woods wanted to come in here in another year, they could do that. And that's important because, sometimes if you pinhold it or pinpointed it for one particular property, you're subject to being, spot zoning. Yes, sir.
Do you guys own this property yet? We're under contract, but the contract then
There's a contract.
Then D.
Yes, sir. Contract ND, they are.
Well, the development is beautiful, and all I've ever seen was pretty, even when they're built, they're pretty. The issue comes down, we have fixed income residents, and the property ages 15, 20 years. When the developers having a problem with the planning and zoning commission, put into the deed that homeowner association condominium be one of a sinking fund, whereby enough money is put in there to handle all landscaping, all improvements in all common areas, like roofs.
So let me just comment. My last condominium project was in New York City, 740,000-foot tower, which is a commercial condominium. All condominiums, organizations try to create a fund so that not only can the property be maintained, but that there is a reserve that's built up for replacing the roof in 20 years, clearing the drains out, every 10 years that they need to be cleaned.
My experience though is that I've seen this done in Sunrise in Texas, where the homeowners, they buy this place, they don't do any landscaping, the actual association takes care of everything, the paint, the landscape, that way the town is ensured that the aesthetics will always be beautiful, and that there will be no deterioration or deferred maintenance. And in fact, the planning commission put into the deed where this becomes a lien to ensure that the place is maintained.
I can't comment on whether that's legal or not, but I can tell you that from...
But would you object to it, that was...
Personally, I won't object to it, absolutely.
Thanks.
Any other questions? One more, John.
I understood your earlier presentation, there are 8 or 9 other lots in Weston, similarly roughly 15 acres. And my question is, if this gets approved, why isn't it just a matter of time, legal precedent before they get approved?
It's the ownership, John, who owns those lots. They're not privately owned lots by farms or people that have for sale. They're occupied, they're owned by either the town, they're owned by Bridgeport Hydraulic, or they're owned by the Audubon Society.
Yeah, but one of those entities that you can decide.
Yeah.
Exactly, it could be like, we built it into this regulation. What happens in other communities is you can actually put a cap on the number of these adult active units that can be built. In other words, you can put a cap number on it, like 100 or 50. So when you limit the developments, the total number of units, Westport has a cap on the number of rental apartments of 600, for instance. You can do that. Yes.
To avoid having the amendment, why not put up 5 or 6 small cottages, 2,000 square feet, all on one level, and put everything on, each one on 2 acres. They'd still have their community.
You don't need to answer that question. It doesn't work financially, it may, but
certain procedure, and when you posed that question the other day, it's a lovely idea. The point is, 5 cottages wouldn't add to the tax contribution the way we'd like to. Certainly wouldn't add over $400,000 to the grand list. It would only satisfy the need for 5 senior couples. And from the price of the land and those cottages price, it would have to be economically feasible to run some sort of association that would be bucolic like we have in mind. But I love the idea of cottages, and I think these are only 6 buildings. So those 6 buildings are going to look like 3 type cottages. In other words, they're going to have the amenities and the design element to be a shingle colonial style house. Thank you, everybody. Joe wants to say one last thing.
Yeah, I have to close it, thank you. I just want to say something. Since meeting this gentleman 3 years ago, I have seen him do nothing but serve this town. And I think this guy deserves a round of applause for everything he does to this town, including this project, which I personally stand behind. My name is on it. I live in town. I have 2 kids in school here. This is the 18th, and by the way, Jessica.